Hello, hello out there in YouTube land. Can anyone hear me? If you could give me a thumbs up. I see there's some people here waiting. Thanks for your patience. Having a little bit of computer difficulty. So let me know that you can hear me. Thumbs up, anybody in the chat. Great, Line. And is it coming through my microphone? Yes, let's hope. I put a poll that I see some of you have seen. Hey, Miss Emily, because I see some votes going on. And let's see, we have 75%. When someone asks you, why not? When you say, or when they ask you, give you a request and you say no, and then they say, well, why not? Right? What is your immediate response? And 67, oh, we have more votes now. 67% say you give an explanation why you said no. 17%, if they push back, I cave and say yes. Interesting. 17% say I feel guilty, but I don't explain much. Oh, we have some more. Okay, now feeling guilty but not explaining much jumped up to 29%. So if you're just coming in, I'd love for you to introduce yourself, put your name and where you're coming in from in the chat. And Lena, I know that you're in Sweden and Miss Emily is in somewhere on the East Coast of the US. Like I want to say Virginia or North Carolina or somewhere like that. I have something to talk about today that came from a question, a comment that someone left on my video recently. And she said, do we owe someone a reason or explanation if they ask why not when we've turned them down for something? And, oh, Indiana. Okay. I wasn't even very close. Indiana. All right. And my answer to her was, and I have thought about this further because I also sent out an email this morning saying that I was going live on this subject. And I said, no, we never owe them an explanation. But I also did some thinking on that. And there is a little bit of a caveat to that. And I'm going to share that with you. But for the most part, I will just, give you the spoiler right now. We don't owe an explanation. We don't owe people a reason for why we're saying no. That's what we're talking about today. Why does this question even come up to begin with, right? Because here's the thing that I told her in the response that I gave her on that video is that if you said yes to something, would they say, why are you saying yes? Right? Would they ask you for an explanation of why you're saying yes? No, nobody does that, right? They got what they wanted. You said yes to their request. And whether that's coming from a unhealthy place, right, in them, or just they're happy that you said yes, that part doesn't really matter. What's the word? The parallel here is that it doesn't go the same both ways. I'm not sure the right word for that. It's a noun. Hi, Nicole. Rapid City, South Dakota. Oh my gosh, I went to college in Vermillion, South Dakota. Welcome. I don't recognize your name. So are you new here to my channel? I appreciate you being here. And we are talking about why we don't need to explain when we say no, why we said no. And if you haven't voted in the poll, I would love to have you vote. Let's see, we have more votes. Oh my gosh. We have 44% for that you give an explanation why you said no. I'd be curious to know in the chat, like, do you give a long-winded explanation? Do you go into detail? Are you hoping to calm them down by you explaining? Are you hoping to calm yourself down? Like you felt guilty for saying no, so you think if you explain that, then that will take away your guilt? So, like, I would love for you to share. Yes, you're new. Welcome. I appreciate you being here. And before I forget, if so I said that I sent out an email. I have down in the description, oh, and maybe I can put it in the chat if I remember what it is. Um, Down in the description, I have a link to a free resource. It's 20 ways to say no without feeling guilty or selfish. You can go grab that from my website. That by doing that, that puts you on my email list, and then you can always unsubscribe if you want. But it's a great free resource. It gives you 20 ways to say no in different situations. And then you will get my updates that I send out via email. You'll be on my email list and get updated to things. Also new, Terry Reclaimed from North Carolina. Thanks for being here. I appreciate it. So we are talking about a comment that I got or a question I got asked on one of my videos last week. And she asked me, do we owe someone an explanation if they ask why not? Right? We said no to something and then they said, well, why not? Do we owe them a reason or an explanation? And what I told her was no. And in the email that I sent out this morning, I said, spoiler alert, no, never. Then I started thinking about it a little more, and there is a caveat to that. So I'm gonna Nicole said I give a long explanation and then cave and say yes if they push back. Okay. I hear you. I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing from recognition because I know that if we have lived by always putting others first, if we were taught, trained, conditioned to believe that other people came first, that I mean, basically then we learned that they were more important than we were, that their needs mattered more than ours did. And so we learn that no is not acceptable. And think about one of the first words that a kid says, when they're learning to talk. It's usually no, right? And then their no is dismissed or punished or ignored, right? Maybe it's no to a food. And I believe now that our bodies, if a kid is hungry, he will eat. And our bodies know what doesn't sit well with us. So if a kid is saying no to a food, most likely he or she doesn't like the taste of that food. Maybe it doesn't sit right in their body. And so, but we learn, right, as kids that no is a bad word. And then add on top of that, if you're female, you probably learned that it wasn't nice to say no, right? And we learn all of these conditions, all these rules, all these things that we think are the truth about how we need to act. And so then we grow into adults who think that it's wrong, that I'm wrong if I say no to someone. So that all of that conditioning teaches us to be a people pleaser. That's what it boils down to. Emily said, I feel guilty and don't explain much when I say no to someone. Do you not explain because, hi, in the Rockies, um, because you just kind of shut down and you don't want to talk about it? You don't want them to push back on you, so it's just easier to not explain and shut down? And in the Rockies said, "I automatically give an explanation when I say no." Okay, can you tell me more about that? What compels you to give an explanation? Miss Emily, yeah, you shut down, right? Like the emotions maybe in yourself, the guilt, the resentment, the frustration, maybe not feeling like you're being heard, right? If someone says, "Well, why not?" That means they're not accepting my answer that I have to have a reason, an excuse. My reason could be I'm staying home and painting my toenails, right? It doesn't matter why. I could have someone else commented and said that, they used to, if they had space in their calendar, right, they used to fill their calendar. And I've talked about this before too, that I had this recognition that this realization that I was saying yes if it fit in my calendar. I wasn't looking at, does it fit in my energy? Do I have space for this in my energy to do it? Just because I have space on my calendar doesn't mean I have to say yes. In the Rockies said, I hated carrots and actually choked on one when I was little. Turns out I'm allergic to carrots. Exactly. That's exactly my point. I teased my mom about that for years. Yeah, I think our bodies our bodies are so smart, right? And was the allergy first and that's what caused you to choke, or did you choke and that caused some trauma that then the body is like, "Oh no, or carrots, we don't want them," and then it developed an allergy, right? Who knows? Emily said, "In the Rockies, when I don't like something, I say that I'm allergic to it." I mean, that's a good, um, a good way, right, for someone not to push back. Um, so what's actually so did I say this already? Yes, but for those of you just jumping in now, right, when we say no to something, people usually ask, "Well, why not?" Or we feel compelled to automatically give an explanation or a reason with it. But the flip side of that is, why don't people ask why when we say yes? If we say yes to something, they don't say, "Well, why?" Right? Like, because they're getting what they want. And again, that doesn't mean that's coming from an unhealthy place when they ask why not, right? Or none of it means automatically that that's coming from an unhealthy place. A lot of times people are just curious, right? But many times it can point to when someone says, why not? That you need to have a reason. And that if your reason isn't good enough for them, then they're going to push back. And that's not a healthy relationship. If people can't accept your no as no without an explanation, then I would look at, how much stress is that causing you in your life to always feel basically unheard and disrespected? Because if you can't respect my no, no is a boundary, right? Then where else are you going to push on my boundaries? Right? And this no could be for anything. No, I don't want to eat that food. No, I uh I don't want to go to that happy hour. No, I don't want to have another drink. No, I don't want to no, I'm not going to dog sit. That's how this this a whole conversation got started was with my video a couple weeks ago about, disappointing people, right? We're so afraid of disappointing someone that we think an explanation or giving a reason will diminish or or prevent their disappointment. But typically what ends up happening is the explanation just diminishes your no. It gives them a reason to push back. It gives them a reason to um, question your actions or what you're saying or how you're living your life. And that can just compound into a very unhealthy relationship. Line said, I also give an automatic explanation. Emily said, I'm an introvert and I say no to a lot of things. So when I say yes to something, it shocks the person. I'm working on saying yes more, but say no when I need to. That's good. Awesome. In the Rockies said, I think it gives me more stress to not give a reason. Tell me more. I have a need for them to know why. Not sure why. Okay, I'm going to go into that. Here's why. So, for a recovering people pleaser, saying no after years of being an auto yeser, right? That can feel like it lands on the other person as a betrayal. Like you're betraying them by saying no. Like you're purposefully hurting them by turning down their request or, not going along with what they're asking of you. It's not because it is a betrayal, right? It's because it's a pattern. It's a pattern that is playing in your subconscious mind from when you were young, right? We learned when we were young that maybe saying no wasn't safe. Maybe we got in trouble for saying no, right? Maybe we got in trouble for making an excuse, which ended up being a lie, right? A lot of times when we come up with an explanation, sometimes is it always the truth? No, we're just saying an explanation to get off the hook, right? To have a reason that we said no, but we could just be making something up. This becomes, right? That can become a vicious cycle also. But it goes back to childhood when we learned that saying no was wrong. And what happens then, it's not a sign that we did something wrong, but that is just the pattern. It's like a cassette tape playing there in your subconscious mind that you're wrong to say no, and that you feel guilty then for saying no because the guilt comes from thinking you did something wrong. And so, in order to alleviate your guilt, your discomfort, you give an explanation, you give a reason, you give an excuse, right? We don't need an excuse ever for saying no, for saying or doing anything that we're doing in our life. It doesn't have to be turning someone down. And again, I go back to no one says, well, why did you say yes? Right? So when you put those two up against each other, that shows you that people see one of them as wrong or not beneficial to them, and they see the other one as right and okay and beneficial to them. Okay, in the Rocky said, I think it gives me more stress to not give a reason. Does that help you see that? It's it's because you're wanting to alleviate your own discomfort, your own guilt, your own maybe even shame from saying no. Because again, maybe you were shamed for it or embarrassed for it when you were younger. Maybe it was wrong. Maybe you were told that you were bad for doing it. Nurse Janice, hi. Hope all is well. All is well. We are talking about, um, you know, do we need to give an explanation or a reason when we tell someone no, even if they ask for one? I was like that, and then this year I say no and don't explain. I don't need to, and they can just deal with it. Exactly. I love it. Life's too short. Emily said, "My mom has always taught me that it's okay to say no and not give an explanation." Good for her. And said, "Don't feel the guilt. I need to work on not to feel the guilt." Right. Yeah. Because the guilt comes from the ego and it's telling us that we're doing something wrong. But again, it is sometimes it, so true guilt is from something that I have done wrong, that I have hurt or harmed someone. But typically, the guilt that a people pleaser feels is not from that, right? It is a habit to feel guilty, and it's actually more shame because you think you are wrong for saying no, not that you're just doing something wrong, that you are wrong, that you are bad, not the thing that you're saying or doing is bad. We end up taking it on as our character, like my identity is bad. Hi, we have more new people. Hi, Susan from Southeast Michigan. We have some Midwest. Do you call Michigan Midwest? I do. I'm from Iowa originally. Um, and people call Ohio like East, and I think, is it? I think it's Midwest also. Michigan, I think, is Midwest. Indiana is Midwest, right? To me. Um, everything and anything. Hi from Boise, Idaho. Wow, we have the US represented. We need more people from Sweden and other places, right, Line? So, by us saying no to someone, this is not a betrayal on them. I do have one little caveat that I'm going to share with you in a little bit. It's not a sign, though, that we did something wrong. It's that is all coming from our past conditioning, the rules that we were taught when we were young. And again, I think so far it's all females here. Oh, that's right, Nurse Janice. I remember. Sorry, I forgot that you're in the UK. Welcome, welcome. Um, all of this, like 95% of our life, is programming. And a lot of that programming, unless we've investigated it, is programs from our childhood. Until about the age of 5, 7, 8, somewhere in there, everything goes into our subconscious as fact. And then just think about that. All of that is the software then. You're born like a blank computer. All of that goes in as software, and you then walk around as this software running. Now I'm 63, so I have 63-year-old software basically, that if I don't look at it, what is the programming in there, and then upgrade to a new program, I'm just running that old program, that saying no is wrong, that I should feel guilty for saying no. How dare I put my needs before someone else's, right? Like all of those things that we were taught, that saying no wasn't nice. And if you can't say anything nice, then don't say anything at all, right? Like all of these subliminal messages that we were given that go in, and now our subconscious, the unconscious, which again runs 95% of your life, 95% of your life is on autopilot. It's just like when you get in your car. Do you think about turning on your car, putting your foot on the brake, and then putting it into, reverse or drive or whatever direction you're going? For me, it's reverse out of the garage. Do you think, oh my gosh, let me put on my seatbelt? No, it's all automated. And 95% of our lives are automated. The reason for that is, if you want a scientific reason, it's because the brain only weighs 3 pounds, but it uses 20% of our energy every day to keep us alive, basically. So in order to conserve energy, it's only 3 pounds, right? It habituates everything that it can because a habit is automatic, right? It doesn't have to use energy to do that thing. So if you repeat something, and that can be a thought, enough times, it becomes a habituated thought. It becomes a habituated behavior. My people pleasing was habituated. I didn't do it on purpose. It was a habit. And to break a habit, to build a new habit, we have to start repeating new things, new thoughts that we want to occur. So that's why one reason I do these lives is to help you see, like, what is a new thing that I can start doing instead of offering an explanation, thinking I have to give a reason, thinking I have to have a reason to say no to something, right? Many times I said yes just because I didn't have a plausible excuse or reason or something on my calendar to say no. Garden artist, I'm new here. I used to say yes to requests until I realized it was making me nuts. Now I usually have no problem saying no. What was your, how did you figure out that it was making you nuts? Like nuts in what way? Were you exhausted? Were you frustrated? Were you resentful? Were you burned out, right? Like saying yes all the time, or I mean, sorry, saying no, but like having to come up with a reason why we're saying no is exhausting. And people pleasing, I say 95% of us, if we continue to people please, will burn out. Um, I know in the Rockies said before that she burned out. Um, I think I missed a couple. Boise, Idaho, Susan from Michigan. Okay, I got those. Right, garden artist said, "Of course not. They're satisfied with your answer as long as it goes in their favor." Exactly, exactly. So if you say yes, they're not going to say, "Well, why did you say yes?" Nicole said, "My parents divorced when I was a child, and now I really struggle with saying no in my marriage because deep down I fear that being authentic can risk the security in my marriage." Super hard. I get that. I've been married 3 times. I totally understand that. I people pleased my way through all of them and recognized that mm, that I was doing it just to not be rejected, right? That I didn't want to say no. I didn't want to bring up tough conversations. I didn't want to say that I was hurt. I didn't want to say no to them. And I better have a damn good excuse if I did, right? For my own sanity, for my own um, feeling of well-being, for my that's not the right word, not well-being, for my own feeling of safety, right? I and so I didn't have those hard conversations. And the thing is that what I realized is I was constantly wearing a mask, right? Depending on um, what, whether it was with a friend or with a group of friends or with my husband at the time, whoever it was, I was wearing a mask and I had to always remember which mask I was wearing, which mask I was supposed to wear with this person or that person. And what I recognized is that mask is very inauthentic, right? So if they are in relationship with me, who are they actually in a relationship with? Do they like the real me or do they like the me that I'm showing up as? And I just started recognizing that I didn't like the feeling of them liking me for who I was pretending to be. I got to the point I got to the point where I wanted to be known for me, right? Not for the disingenuous person that I was being, the inauthentic person I was being, because that wasn't truly me. And I couldn't fully live into my life and feel a sense of joy and fulfillment in my life when I was carrying all that guilt and shame and um self-deprecation. Is that the right word? Like, I beat myself up. I put myself down. I carried all this shame of the things that I thought were wrong with me instead of letting someone see the real me and loving me for all of that anyway. That is unconditional love, right? But when I was showing up inauthentically, I was getting the love that was conditional. It was conditional on me showing up as pleasing, as serving, um as acquiescing, as compliant, right? That's not unconditional love. And I realized that felt empty. It felt super empty inside because I was always on that edge, like you said, Nicole, that edge of, holy shit, if I speak up, is this over? And I didn't want to live that way anymore. And I was married for 17 years. I have a video on my channel about this. The thumbnail says something like the hard conversation that no, I think that's the title, the hard conversation that ended my 17-year marriage. I felt so alone in that marriage. I felt so lonely. And I went to him and I said, if I'm going to feel this alone, I would rather be alone. And that ultimately, 6 months later, led to us separating and getting a divorce. Because I finally spoke my truth, but I was ready to take on the the outcome of that. I knew the outcome might not be, it might not be positive. It might be really hard, and it was. I shed a lot of tears during that time, but I was tired of living as a chameleon and as um a fake version of me. That was the first step, right? Then I got married again and realized that I hadn't healed a lot of it. And he ended up storming out after 10 months when he realized I had enough sense, but when he realized he couldn't control me. And I didn't know it, but I had married a narcissist, someone that, was gaslighting me and emotionally abusing me. All of that to say, so that was really my starting over point because when he left, I realized that I was the common denominator in all of my relationships. And I don't know how I got here because um, I guess I do know because Nicole said that being authentic can feel super hard, right? Because it's the way we've been being is this chameleon, and that's what the unconscious, that's the program it's running, right? That's what feels safe. For the unconscious, what feels safe is what's familiar. And so when we've lived those people pleasing patterns for so long, That is familiar, and familiar equals safety to the brain. And so, even though you know maybe speaking up would be better for you, right? Or not explaining or saying no when you need to say no for your own well-being, it's hard because the subconscious, again, which runs 95%, right? That's the programming. It is going to try and keep you in saying yes because that is what's safe and predictable and familiar, even though it's not ultimately what's best for you. So my husband stormed out. I realized within a couple of days, oh my gosh, I am the common denominator in all my relationships. That is truly my turning point. It was the catalyst that I needed to figure out that I was the one creating this because I was the one wearing the masks. Not saying that they weren't also, but this is my life, right? If I want to create my life authentically, then I have to look at what I'm doing, not what anyone else is doing. And that started me on my journey 8 years ago of really figuring out who is it that I want to be? Get How do I get rid of all these masks that I've been wearing? How do I start showing up for me, right? And that brings us back to this subject of not explaining ourselves, not explaining why we're doing something that we're doing, why we said something that we said. Now, if it's something hurtful, yes, making repair, right? Making amends for that hurtful thing. I went to Codependence Anonymous for 3 years. I highly recommend if you are struggling that you go check out a meeting or 5 or 10 or 3 years worth because it changed me. It's free, so there's no reason to not go. There are women's groups only, so there are so many resources. Again, I have a free resource, 20 ways to say no without feeling guilty or selfish, just as kind of a side note to this conversation. Let's see what else. Um, and so I totally understand, Nicole, because you have evidence, right? Your brain has evidence that if I'm to speak up for myself, like it's making the link that that could potentially lead to divorce. And yes, it could, but you are the only one able to decide, um, what if, right? What if it actually made your relationship stronger, right? We typically don't think about that other side of it because the evidence we think from the past is there that this is the outcome. And again, the subconscious holds us back because that's the only evidence, right? We don't have the evidence that if I spoke up, if I started saying no, if I started speaking up for myself, we don't have the evidence yet that that could actually make my relationship stronger. But it could. It could actually make your relationship stronger. Garden artist said, I'm new here. I used to say yes to requests until I realized it was making. Oh, yeah, we said that already. I read that already. Um, Emily said, I have to scoot. Have a great rest of your week. Hope to see you next week. Garden artist said, when we were small, we were asked by our parents and they expected us to say yes or else. Siblings asking for something was a different story, resulted in arguments. Huh. Interesting. So you're saying like you were expected. Oh, I think I missed some. Uh, Garden artist said, I found that saying no, that doesn't work for me right now. That kind of leaves it open for discussion, right? Which I can continue to enforce my wish not to do something. Yes, that doesn't work for me. Is a great way. right? Oh, I missed a whole bunch of conversations here. Let me back up. Okay, so I think I got this. Garden artist said, I'm new here. I used to say yes to requests until I realized it was making me nuts. Now I usually have no problem saying no. Cool. Miss Emily said, I'm working hard on it. It's okay to say no and take a step back and rest when your body says rest. Line said, I don't have time after a no. Might be a little white lie, but I feel it's more polite than a no without anything after. Okay, cool. Yeah, and I'm gonna talk a little bit about, like, when it might be okay to give a little bit of a explanation. Terry said, "I also postponed the no by saying, 'I'll let you know,' just trying to postpone the conversation of, um, I am saying no." Yeah, I think I like to look at it as a pause, right? To give me time to process what I'm being asked to do, and so I don't look at it necessarily or even that I'm lying. I had a thing come up a few weeks ago where someone asked me, this is a different dog sitting story, but she asked me to, dog sit on a weekend coming up in August, and I had something tentatively a retreat that I'm looking at going to, and so I just replied and said, "I'm not sure," and this was honest, I wasn't giving an explanation. I simply said, "I'm not sure yet. I have something else that's a potential on my calendar. When do you need to know by?" Right? That because usually people want to know right away so that they can make their plans. She came back and said 1 to 2 weeks is fine. If hadn't asked that question of her, I would have thought I would have needed to give her a reason, I mean, an answer within a day or 2, right? And then I would have felt guilty because I wasn't coming up with the reason and blah, blah, blah. Um, Instead, she was like, "Yeah, a week or 2 is fine." So that gave me time to really sit into this retreat and figuring out, is this something that I feel called to right now? I didn't want to make a decision on the retreat right away, and asking, right, then gave me the breathing room to not actually make that decision right away. But if we just say yes or no, or, give an excuse or offer an explanation, we maybe don't even know what their truth is about it, right? Um, let's see. I also postponed the no. Right. Okay, I said that already. Garden artist said, I don't feel I need to justify my answer. Okay, great. That's awesome. I love it. Nicole, this is so spot on. I'm glad it's hitting. Emily, I know she's gone. With this one friend, when I would say no to her, she would get an attitude toward me and not talk to me and avoid me when we would work together. You know what? When people show you who they are, believe them, right? That's what I'll say to that. Um, I think Maya Angelou said that. Nicole said, I've been pretending so long, I hardly know who I really am. Wow. That breaks my heart a little bit for you. I don't know how old you are, Nicole, but I was 48, I believe, when I got divorced from the 17-year marriage, so I totally get you. 17 years I pretended, and I had no clue, and that's partly, I think, why 5 years later, I ended up meeting someone, and we dated for 2 years, but getting married to him because I still truly hadn't figured out who I was. Um, I just knew I wasn't the person. I didn't want to be that person in that 17-year marriage where I was alone and lonely anymore, right? And so I I stepped out of that, but then I didn't go into full discovery mode of who I truly wanted to be, and I got back into people pleasing, and that attracted the narcissist to me. So, yeah, I totally hear you that pretending it we end up because when we pretend, what do? We shrink. We play small. We don't show up. We don't speak up. We pretend, right? We wear a mask. When we live a lot, like think about if you were in a play, right? You're pretending to be a certain character. That takes work, right? You have to remember and work to stay in character, to speak the way that they would speak, to think the way that they would think, to play that character. That's what you're doing. That's what I was doing. Was I was playing a character in my own life instead of living my own life. Let's see. In the Rockies said, I'm way behind on the live, but if I say no to going into town with someone, then I explain because I don't want them to think it has anything to do with them. It's just me. Okay, I'm going to talk about that in a little bit in the Rockies, and you'll catch up. Garden artist said, I found that saying no. Are you Susan? I can't remember. Um, I need to take more notes. I found that saying no, that doesn't work for me right now. That kind of leaves it open for discussion, which I can continue to enforce my wish not to do something. Yes, absolutely. Emily said, I'm just so tired with life. Oh, um, garden artist, the problem is that some people feel entitled no matter how you answer. Absolutely. And your answer isn't going to take away their sense of entitlement, right? No matter whether you answer yes or no, they're still going to continue to feel entitled. Possibly, the more those people get told no, maybe eventually they'll start looking at themselves and looking at, wait, how am I showing up, right? I'm sure as a people pleaser, there were times that I probably showed up with a sense of entitlement, right? So I just all want us, you, me, to live our best lives. And that's what I'm working toward. That's what I want to guide you toward. And we can only do that when we know who we are and what we want and what feeds our soul and what steals our peace, right? And then moving forward from there. Garden artist, when we were small, we were asked by our parents. Oh, I think I read. Okay, now I'm catching up. To say yes or else, which I'm assuming means like if you don't say yes, then you're going to suffer the consequences, right? Um, Kitten claws guitar videos. People do wear masks. I live in a government town. People are very censored and careful of what they say. On top of it, it is toxic positivity, and so it's very difficult to get through the layers. I think the most important thing is to get through our own layers first, right? Like, what layers have I built up in me that I need to and in Codependence Anonymous, they talk about the layers of the onion, right? Like, codependency is peeling back the layers of the onion, and we just keep peeling and peeling and peeling. Um, and it's not our job to peel back other people's layers. If they don't want to show their true self to me, that's not my job to convince them or to make them or to change myself to help them or to try and soothe their emotions, right? That's not my job. Nicole said, I never thought about it that way. I think I'm way behind. So maybe about how it could benefit your relationship by you starting to share more of your vulnerabilities? Maybe that's what that was about. Garden artist, hi, I guess Michigan is Midwest. Right now it feels more like the deep South, hot and humid. I hear you. Iowa was the same way. Garden artist, right. We were expected to please everyone and be happy and smiling 24/7, right? And I don't know as an adult if if someone has ever said to you, "Wow, where's the smile? Why such a sad face?" Right? Smile, you look prettier, all that, crap that we were taught. Um, Angela, I'm new here. I just found your site recently. I grew up being a people pleaser, pleasing everyone. I've left myself out of all my life. I'm learning to say no. It's hard. I hear you. Go grab that free guide, that free resource. It's a place to small start. It's a small place to start. I also have my inner circle membership, which are deeper dive videos. I just put a new video in there last week. So there are a few videos. There's a great video in there about how all of this is patterned into us from a young age. It's $5.99 a month, $5.99 a month. So $6 a month. You can go in, watch the videos that are in there now, and unsubscribe if you want. Or stay for a year or stay for 2 years. I don't, it's all up to you, right? It's an invitation, not an obligation. I created those videos to have a place to be able to go a little bit more one-on-one with people in those videos at a low, a low entry point. Garden artist, I wanted people to like me, so I automatically said yes, or the occasional I don't care. What do you want to do? Crazy. Yeah. And there is a Reddit post that, wow, blows that wide open about how that is so frustrating to non-people pleasers for us to say to them, "I don't care, what do you wanna do?" And that was me, because that puts the whole, um, weight on them to decide everything, right? And then they're left with, well, what if it doesn't turn out and the people pleaser doesn't like what I chose? There was someone that actually commented about how she had a people pleaser, a friend in her life who would always say, "I don't care, where do you wanna go eat?" Right? And so she would end up picking, and then they would get there, and the person was vegan or something, and she picked a seafood restaurant, not knowing enough about this friend, and then the people-pleasing friend would get upset because there was nothing she could eat, but she would just go along with it and, figure out something and, just placate, and it's like this frustrating battle that other people have with people who people please, and now that I'm mostly on the other side of that, I don't profess to be always not, um, not a people pleaser, right? It's a deep groove. That people pleasing is a deep groove of me thinking I'm gonna disappoint somebody and therefore I'm wrong and therefore I'm a bad person, right? That is a deep, deep groove that is taking a while to fill in. It's like a scratch on a record, right? It never maybe fully goes away, but it's learning to recognize it. Pressure to agree and say yes to keep the peace. My first marriage to a very controlling man. Yeah, absolutely. I hear you. My first husband had the power to make my life miserable if I disagreed. Someone finally told me that I was giving my power away. What an awakening, right? Every time and that was on my notes about this. Every time we say yes and then give an I mean, say no, and then give an explanation, we're basically saying, here's my excuse. Is it good enough? That is giving our power away, right? Every time we don't speak up for ourselves, every time we say yes when we really wanted to say no, it's basically like, here, you take my life, do with it what you want. You control me, right? You tell me how to live. And that's partly why I had what was so hard about stopping people pleasing is because I had turned all my decisions over to the other person, whether that was a friend or a church member or a, family member, my spouse, whoever it was. They made the decisions. They knew what was best for me. An authority, a doctor. I no longer allow that in my life for a doctor to just point blank say, here, you need to start taking this statin because you have high cholesterol. I no longer just accept that as an automatic, those kind of things as automatic truths. I know I know my body best. I know where I'm at, where I'm coming from. I yeah, I no longer allow someone else to be the authority over my life, not just health things in every way. Narcissist been there times 2. Yeah, uncomfortable temporarily. I'm not quite sure what that was relating to. Um, So in the poll, when someone asks why not after you said no, what do you usually do? Give an explanation. Why I said no is 53%. So yes, it's a habit, right? It's a habit that we have to unlearn. So what's actually happening underneath is that we over explain not out of honesty, it's out of self protection. And I said that already, right? The subconscious knows this predictable and normal. If we stay predictable and normal, we stay safe because we know the outcome. Our brain is just a protector predictor. It just predicts based on the past. So if you want to create something new, right, you have to start taking the uncomfortable new actions. But someone said this, right? We do it because we want to stay likable. We want to avoid conflict. We want to soothe their feelings and skip our own discomfort in that no, in sitting in that no. Sitting in that no without an explanation is going to feel uncomfortable. I think a lot of times I was waiting to not feel guilty, to not feel uncomfortable, thinking that was the signal that now I was okay to say no. I'm not going to feel okay. I'm not going to feel guilty saying no without an explanation until I start saying no without an explanation. It's like I talked about in that video about disappointing. We have to do the reps. And someone asked me in the comments, what do you mean by do the reps? Which was a great question. To clarify what I mean by we can't go to the gym and sit in the parking lot and think that we're going to build muscles, right? We have to actually go in, we have to step into the gym and start lifting the weights. We have to start saying no without explaining ourselves. That is doing the reps, right? That is lifting the weight. And as we lift the weight, right, that weight starts feeling easier over time. It doesn't feel so heavy anymore. That's an analogy for you saying no without an explanation. At first, you're going to feel really weak at doing it because you haven't built the muscle. Doing it over time, just like I did to, like I talked about in that video about disappointing people, I said no to her without an explanation. Her response to me was, "That's disappointing." I had to sit with that for a little bit, but it didn't take long before it's like, well, that's her response. That's her emotion to manage. It's no longer mine to manage. But that didn't happen to me automatically, right? I had to say no enough times without an explanation before it was much easier, where I didn't feel so weak doing it, where I felt stronger doing it. Garden artist and comfortable temporarily, right. Garden artist. When I started standing up for myself after the divorce, my young adult daughters didn't like the new me. It was difficult. They were used to being a doormat. Exactly. We Unless it feels good to be, have people's shoes wiped all over you, we have to stand up and stop being that doormat, right? It doesn't, and that was a facetious statement, right? I know it doesn't feel good. I was that doormat, right? There was like a welcome sign stamped on my forehead, and it doesn't feel good to be taken advantage of. But I pointed the finger at them for so long, like, I'm so nice. Why are they taking advantage of me? Shame on them, right? I thought my resentment was because of them. My resentment was because of me, because I wasn't standing up for myself. I was resentful at myself for always saying yes, but I didn't recognize that for a long time. So what does healthy actually look like? Healthy people can hold your no without you managing their reaction to it, right? Your daughters, that was new to them, right? So of course maybe it felt like you were um I don't know, discounting them, or maybe you were rejecting them. Maybe it felt like a betrayal to them. Right, and I'm gonna talk about a caveat to when maybe an explanation, is warranted. Um, but remember that this over-explaining, it invites negotiation. A clean no or a clean not yet, that doesn't invite negotiation. There's no negotiation to that boundary of saying no. Garden artist said, "People get used to you being a doormat and get a little weird when you begin to protect yourself and say no to the request." It tells you everything you need to know about some people. Exactly, right, because they're used to them being able to take advantage of you, and you always taking on the load, right? Like, I know this comes up a lot in work situations where people ask you to take on extra projects that you just can't, that you don't have the bandwidth for, but you say yes. And I did this in my job when I worked in corporate. I would say yes without saying, like, I'm already overburdened, right? This may not get back to you for a month because I just don't have the bandwidth for it. So here's the caveat, and you kind of alluded to it, garden artist, when you brought up um about your daughters not liking the new you. If there wasn't a conversation there with them, and I'm not saying that you didn't have a conversation, right, about how you were starting to stand up for yourself in this, relationship, and if that was their dad, there's a lot to that, right? But if they were old enough to be included in a conversation about why you were needing to choose what you were choosing and that it wasn't about them, right? But like a more simple caveat is, let's say a friend asks you to go on vacation with her and you decline. If you say nothing, she might assume that you don't value the friendship, right? But if you say, no, I can't, I'm not in a place financially to do that right now, that explains that the friendship is valuable to you, but that you just can't, right? I think that is a reason to explain your no, because you want them to understand that you're not discounting them. You're not just saying no and leaving them to think, "Oh, crap, I guess we aren't as good of friends as I thought," right? So I think that is a reason, or maybe your adult, um, child ask you to keep their kids for them, your grandchildren for them while they go on a trip, while, they go with their spouse on a trip. If you say no and offer nothing else, like, your child might think, "Wow, I guess she doesn't want to spend time with her grandkids. She doesn't value the relationship with the grandkids," right? So, that again, there might need to be a little explanation. Maybe you have a health concern that just came up that you hadn't talked to them about yet, where you just physically can't. There was someone, and this is a little bit different of a story, but someone just commented, a couple days ago on my video about how I think it was her daughter-in-law, asked her to take their 2 dogs, German Shepherds, while the daughter-in-law went on vacation, and I'm not quite sure of if it was step or what it was, but doesn't matter. While she went on vacation with her husband, a 2-week cruise with her husband. The woman had just had hip surgery and was in a wheelchair. She said no, and the daughter-in-law, like, blew a gasket. Obviously, not a healthy daughter-in-law, not a healthy response whatsoever, but in that situation, it's pretty obvious why the woman said no, right? Oh, yeah, I read that already, okay. Um, so there are some times when an explanation, a short reason might be valid, but typically, if someone is asking you why not, they're not looking for a plausible reason, they're looking for an opening to push back on you, to guilt trip you. So, what if you stopped explaining? What if every unexplained no that you give starts to become, right, that evidence that you're healing, that you aren't wrong for saying no, that you don't need to explain your no, and that it's not evidence that you're hurting someone or that you're a bad person or that you're doing something wrong or that you have something to be ashamed of. And what if the discomfort that you feel after you say no, it's just unfamiliarity, right? It's just something that you haven't done enough times that it feels familiar yet. So the goal isn't to become someone who never explains themselves, right? It's to become someone who that you can explain, but you, for the most part, choose not to, right? It's my choice to explain or not, but it's also my decision to look at how does my explaining myself why I said no to something, why I'm living my life the way I'm living my life, why why am I choosing, right, to not do that? And for me, it's because it it brings me peace to not have to defend my decisions to people. And if there which there were people in my life who needed me to explain my decisions, those people are no longer in my life. And that was something that I had to face, that I may lose people in my life by stopping being who they always needed me to be or expected me to be for their benefit, because this is my life. I'm living it on my terms, right? And that's what I would love to help you all do, is to live life on your terms, because We only, as far as we know, we only get one chance at it, right? At this life, this time here on earth. Not saying that we don't have other, you know, other lives that we come back as. I don't know that to be true or not true. So, but I want to live the best life that I can live now while I'm here living it and not get on my deathbed and have regrets that I didn't, that I always lived my life on someone else's terms. I don't want to do that. That is what I have for you today. I appreciate you being here. 57% give an explanation why I said no. I hope that helps you clarify why a no is not necessary. I mean, sorry, an explanation or reason is not necessary for the most part. And if you have further comments, you can put them after this live stream ends down in the comments. You can go grab that free resource, 20 Ways to Say No. It puts you on my mailing list. If you want to unsubscribe off of it after you get the free resource, you are perfectly welcome to do that. But you'll get updates on, what's happening. I try to do an update every week when I'm going live so that it's just a reminder that I'm going live on YouTube. I do those updates through email, and then other things that are happening in Mastering Midlife. So I appreciate you being here. I go live every Wednesday at 2:22 Eastern Time. If you have something you want me to cover, by all means, ask, right? Put it in a comment. Send me a message. If you get on my email list, you can send me a message through email. So I appreciate you being here. I appreciate you participating in the chat. It helps other people. It helps me know what's going on out there in your life, in your mind, and what you're struggling with, and how your experiences can help other people. So again, I appreciate you being here. Have a great week, and I will see you next week.